second. Thank you. Could I get some water? Nice to have the morning, the new Goloka morning schedule.
Nice to have what?
The new Goloka morning schedule.
It's a practical schedule because what I found is with the longer normal ISKCON schedule, nothing gets done for you. You know, you start the day at 10:30.
If you're lucky, if you don't have to take a nap afterwards.
And my whole,
Yeah, I know. And 3/4.
also, most of the morning, most of the devotees in the other temples, they spend their time chatting during those hours.
Yeah,
I was in the last one. Everyone leaves the temple, they drive away, go back to their homes, and come back.
that's right. Well, I remember in Detroit, we had a reporter come once. And when Japa started, she walked up to me. She said, "Is this your official talking time?" Yeah, it does. I hope that even after you depart from this world, it continues. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajanarandana Yasodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Jayom Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Parivrajikacharya, Asotara Satashri Srimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Mathura Dham ki jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Gangamaya Jamuna Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Tulsi Maharani ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskachade Shatarane Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Paritana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpachubhischa Kripasindabhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. July 6, 2026, in New Goloka, Hillsborough, North Carolina. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 75, Text 19. Pati samyaja vabhrityais charitva te tamritvija achantam snapayam chakrur Gangayam Saha Krishnaya. Please chant. Charitva te tamrit vijaha achantam snapayam chakrur Gangayam Saha Krishnaya Padnis Vijayas Charitva te tamrit vijaha Tapayam chakrur Gangayam Saha Krishnaya Patni samyaja brabhrityais Charitva te tamrit vijaha Achantam snapayam chakrur Gangayam Saha Krishnaya Patni samyava vrittatas Charitva te tamrit vija Achanyam snapaya vrityur Gangayam Saha Krishnaya Patni Samyaja. The ritual performed by the sponsor of the sacrifice and his wife consisting of oblations to Soma, Twasta, the wives of certain demigods, and Agni. Avabhrityai, and the rituals which solemnize the completion of the sacrifice. Charitva, having executed, te, they, tam, him, Ritvijha, the priests, achantam, having sipped water for purification, snapayam chakru, they had him bathe, Gangayam, in the Ganges, Saha, along with Krishnaya, Draupadi. BBT translation. The priests led the king through the execution of the final rituals of Patni Samyajya and Abhabritya. Then they had him and Queen Draupadi sip water for purification and bathe in the Ganges. Srila Prabhupada translates this verse in Krishna book. Following the Rajasuya sacrifice, there was the Vedic ritualistic duty known as Pati Samyajya. This sacrifice, which one performs along with one's wife, was also duly conducted by the priests of King Yudhisthira. So there's no BBT purport. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. The priests performed the Patni Samyajya, a ritual done by the sponsor of a sacrifice and his wife, which consists of oblations to Agni, Soma, Twasta, and the wives of certain demigods. So what the BBT translators did was put this into the word for word. They also arranged the Avaricha bath, the ritual which solemnizes the completion of the sacrifice for Yudhisthira and his wives. Srila Sanatana Goswami's commentary, the priests previously mentioned, Te, headed by Vyasadeva, or well known for skills in all rituals, led the king. He sipped water with Draupadi Krishnaya. Srila Jiva Goswami's commentary, this verse describes going to the Ganga as part of the Avaricha bath. The priests were Vyasadeva and others. Patni Samyajava Brityais Charitva Te Tamrit Vijaha Achantam Sna Payam Chakrur Gangan Yam Saha Krishnaya. The priests led the king through the execution of the final rituals of Patni Samyaja and Abhabrita. Then they had him and King Draupadi sip water for purification and bathe in the Ganges. We should just mention briefly that although only Krishnaya is mentioned in the verse, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says this also includes both of the wives of Yudhisthira. The other wife, so Draupadi was the wife he shared with his brothers. Okay? So we don't see that so often in the scriptures. There was one lady who married 49 fire gods. And then there was one lady who married all 10 Prachetas. There are certain parts of India where that still goes on. Generally, it goes in the other direction. Anyway, so he had one wife he shared with his brothers and one wife that was just his, and that was Devika, who was the daughter of King Shaivya, and they had a son, Yodheya. So with both of those wives, but particularly Draupadi's mentioned because she's considered the chief wife, the empress. So we see here that the women were also an essential part of Vedic rituals. It wasn't just that Yudhisthira was bathing and doing the rituals and Draupadi was just somewhere off cleaning. She's also part of the rituals. Yes, she's also included like that. And we see that also female devatas are also being worshipped. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur mentions, and is put into the BBT word for word, that this particular ritual is not only worshiping the male devatas, but the female devatas as well. And of course we see in Indic traditions that there are many female devatas worshipped. In fact, we are also worshiping Radha Golokananda. We're not just worshiping Golokananda. And our mantra, our main mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare is referring, Hare can also refer to Hari. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in explaining his definition of the mantra, has some of the Hares referring to Hari, Krishna, and some referring to Hara, or Srimati Radharani. But we see this worship of the Lord along with his feminine energy is prevalent in all of the Indic traditions, correct? Yes? People sometimes make propaganda that the push to have women properly respected in our ISKCON society is a Western idea. Actually, the situation historically is exactly the opposite. In Judaism, Christianity, Muslim, they have women saints, but they never have women priests. Now they're starting to have women priests and ministers. But in the Indic tradition, that was always there. Having women priests, having women gurus, having women involved in the various rituals of the sacrifice is actually part of the Indic tradition, not the Western tradition. People think of it backwards. And here we find Draupadi in her glory. Right? We find Draupadi in her glory. We've just done the Rajasuya sacrifice. Yudhisthira's the emperor. Yudhisthira and Draupadi are going through the rituals, and it looks like they're about to rule the world. Yes? Is that what's going to happen, though? No, it's not what's going to happen, at least not now. So we're going to look at how women create auspiciousness in society when they're properly engaged in yajna, and inauspiciousness in society when they're harmed. And then we're going to look at this from the perspective of Draupadi, who's about to go from the highest honor that she could possibly get on the whole planet. Yudhisthira's he's just been enthroned as the emperor of the planet, not just a mayor or a governor or a president. We don't have a world emperor, and she's there as his chief queen. She's going to go from there to very, very soon, yes? In fact, what is this chapter entitled? How Duryodhana felt insulted. And because of his insults, he's going to retaliate. Of course, he's already tried to murder the Pandavas. But what are the main reasons that people commit murder or heinous crimes? Envy, right? Or vengeance, or greed. So he has this mood of envy and vengeance. So Draupadi's just about to go from the most honored woman on the planet to one of the most dishonored, or an attempt at least to see her dishonored. So we're going to finally look at this from her position and how we can deal with honor and dishonor. But I first wanted to look at how important it is that women should be engaged in auspicious activities. Actually, everybody should be engaged in auspicious activities, and everybody, which may surprise some people, includes the female half of the population. Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna book in chapter 23 about delivering the wives of the Brahmanas, that Lord Krishna tells the wives, engage yourself in sacrificial activities and in the service of your husband in household affairs, both. Not just the service of your husband in household affairs, but also in sacrificial activities. Actually, Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter that the women were not just meant to engage in household affairs, but also in preaching. He said, therefore, you should have nursery schools for the young children, where the different women can act as teachers and the women can be engaged in service. He was very upset when Kirtananda took the women off book distribution in the city, brought them to New Vrindavan, and had them just churning butter. He said, send them back out on book distribution. So Krishna's saying this. This isn't just Srila Prabhupada making some adjustment for the women, modern, Western, feminist women. No, that's not true. The Lord himself is saying this to the wives of the Brahmins. Engage yourself in sacrificial activities and in the service of your husband and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you, and the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders. Without their help, how can they execute their prescribed duties? And Prabhupada goes on commenting on this. He says, after being instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the wives returned home to their respective husbands. Pleased to see their wives back home, the Brahmanas sat together with them and executed the performances of sacrifice as enjoined in the Shastras. According to Vedic principles, religious rituals must be executed by the husband and wife together. When the Brahmanas' wives returned, the sacrifice was duly and nicely executed. This is also, Prabhupada explains in Canto 5, Chapter 3, purport. According to the Vedic injunctions, one should perform sacrifices in the company of one's wife. Sapnaniko dharmam acharet. Religious rituals should be performed with one's wife. Therefore, Maharaj Nabi conducted his great sacrifice with his wife by his side. So this injunction created a very interesting conundrum for the Supreme Lord himself. Does anyone know that situation? The Supreme Lord himself, he wanted to do yagyas, and he didn't have his wife, Lord Ramachandra. What was he couldn't do the yagyas? And he had taken Ek Patni Vrat. Now, Ek Patni Vrat didn't mean one wife until death do we part. It meant one wife, period. That was it. He wasn't going to, even though Sita had entered into the earth, he wasn't going to say, okay, now I'm going to remarry. I'm never going to marry again. So what was he going to do? He had to follow his vow, but he needed a wife for the yajna. So what did he do? He created a murti, a golden murti of Sita, right? To sit by him. And of course, Srila Prabhupada engaged women in yajna. Engage women in yajna. Every morning in every ISKCON temple all over the world, we greet the deities listening to Yamuna singing the Brahma Samhita. Of course, one time when in Mayapur Dham, she was visiting, and one of the leaders said, you know, because you're personally here, why don't you sing directly into the microphone instead of playing the recording? We'll have you sing into the mic. So she started to do that, and some fanatic person grabbed the mic out of her hands and wouldn't allow her to sing. Another time, some devotees complained to Prabhupada, why are we listening to a woman singing for the deities? And Prabhupada was very angry and said, no. So Prabhupada engaged the women like that. Even he told my god sister Saradiya, who had Vaishnav Diksha, she had the Diksha mantras, but her husband did not, and they were at some distance. They were starting a temple on their own. And Prabhupada said, you can give your husband the mantras, and you or any other twice-initiated devotee can perform the yajnas. Prabhupada, of course, in India, had Yamuna install deities in his presence in a public event. So he would have women he would tell them, you lead the kirtan, you give the class, you install the deities, you perform the yajna. So Prabhupada was doing this, again, not as some adjustment because some feministic women were crying for materialistic equal rights, but he did this because this is part of the tradition. We see in the Bhagavatam itself, which Srila Jiva Goswami says is our highest authority. Prabhupada's doing things with the authority of the Shastra. And conversely, when you don't, this is true for everyone should be engaged. Men, women, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, everybody. Right? It's just this morning reading Nectar Devotion, how Prabhupada says this injunction to always remember Krishna and never forget him, this is applicable to all the varnas, all the ashrams, everybody. Not just a certain, even we try to engage the animals. We give the animals prasad. Prabhupada said even a dog can take part in the Sankirtan movement. Sometimes we see this, yes? One of my godbrothers, Janananda Maharaj, he wrote a book about animals and Krishna consciousness. How we've had that here in our temple, correct? When your husband Gopal came, he brought his cat, Tom. So you weren't here then, you didn't know him then. So you didn't know your husband yet, and I don't think you ever met Tom. But he would come every morning to Mangalartik, right? Those of you here, Maharaj, you remember? He would sit outside one of the windows there every morning, and then he'd sit outside the window during Bhagavatam class, and when we'd say, he would be quiet the whole time, and then, does anyone have questions? Meow, meow. And he would eat prasadam that normally cats don't eat, and he wouldn't stick his mouth in it. He would take his paw and take the prasadam, put it to his mouth. So we've had, even animals we tried to engage in yajna. The devotees asked Prabhupada, what about the ducks we're feeding every day? And will they get a human birth? Prabhupada said, if you're giving them prasadam every day, they can even go back to Godhead. So what to speak of all classes of human beings? But if we don't engage women in yajna, if instead women are seen as objects to be exploited, then there's inauspiciousness in society. As Prabhupada writes in his purport to Bhagavatam 1.7.48, to insult a chaste woman means to bring about disaster in the duration of life. Dushasana, a brother of Duryodhana, insulted Draupadi, an ideal chaste lady, and therefore the miscreants died untimely. These are some of the stringent laws of the Lord mentioned above. And in 116.21, Prabhupada writes in his purport, in the age of Kali, the women and the children, along with brahmanas and cows, will be grossly neglected and left unprotected. In this age, illicit connection with women will render many women and children uncared for. These are some of the symptoms of the Kali age, which are harmful to the general welfare of human society. And Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaka are described like this in 3:14:40 translation. They will kill poor, faultless living entities, torture women, and enrage the great souls. And in his purport, Prabhupada says, demoniac activities are predominant when innocent, faultless living entities are killed, women are tortured, and the great souls engaged in Krishna consciousness are enraged. So the tendency in this world is if somebody is weaker than you, you exploit them. That's the tendency in this world. Mostly, generally, women are physiologically weaker than men, generally. Correct? Some exceptions. But generally speaking, and more vulnerable. We're more vulnerable to be exploited sexually. We're more vulnerable because our process of reproduction is different. When a woman is pregnant, woman is in labor, woman is recovering from childbirth, nursing, she's vulnerable, much more so than a man. And if the man thinks, oh, let me exploit the women, let me keep them down, then all of society becomes ruined. But instead, if the men are thinking, let me help them and also engage them in yajna, also engage them in this process of Sanatana Dharma, that everything is auspicious. So when Draupadi is being glorified, engaged in yajna, everything is auspicious. Vyasadeva is the priest. Wouldn't that be nice to have Vyasadeva be your priest? And then very, very soon afterwards, and we don't want to give away too much, we don't want to have too much of a spoiler alert, but very soon afterwards, Draupadi is about to be severely dishonored, which brings about great inauspiciousness for the whole world and leads ultimately to a war. To a war. There are so many wars going on in the world today, and people trying to solve the wars in so many ways. Do any of them think the way we're going to solve the war is to stop exploiting and harming and torturing people? No. They never talk like that. They never say, if we really want to stop war, why don't we protect the women? Why don't we protect the cows? Why don't we close the slaughterhouses? Prabhupada says when you're slaughtering animals, the result's going to be war. When you're exploiting women, the result is going to be war. The result is going to be violence in society. And we have to say, frankly, the mistreatment of women in our Hare Krishna movement has led to we haven't started shooting each other, but verbally at least. It's like it's led to so much offense. Am I correct? So much offense. And there's that nice verse, if you see the deity as stone, you see the guru as an ordinary man, you think, oh, a Vaishnava according to their body, then you're a resident of hell. If you think, oh, this is an Indian Vaishnava, this is a Peruvian Vaishnava, an American, what a female, male Vaishnava. Of course, practically, we have to deal according to the body. We speak different languages. We have some different cultural customs. Obviously, male and female bodies have to be dealt with but if we're thinking like this, everything becomes inauspicious, and then we are under the spell of Kali. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says we can be a Kali Chela. We can be wearing tilak and have beads and actually be a disciple of Kali. So this is a Kali, right? Prabhupada says, I'm not saying, don't shoot the messenger here. Prabhupada's saying this is the age of Kali. Now, women are tortured, the cows are killed, the brahmanas are disrespected. But now let's look at it from the other point of view. from Draupadi's point of view. So it was nice, Gauranga Darshanpur was saying this so nicely, how whether we're honored, whether we're dishonored, right? Whether Krishna is giving us something, whether he's taking away, that still we remain faithful. Sometimes people they worship God only when things are going well, and sometimes people worship God only when things are going badly. My late god sister Kalunga and I were walking once in London. We were following where Prabhupada took his morning walk. And this other woman was walking there, so she walked with us for a little while. And we were just chanting japa. She was asking what we were doing, and Kalangana was trying to preach to her to chant Hare Krishna also, which wasn't effective at all. And this lady said, well, everything's fine in my life. Why should I pray? I'll pray only when there's problems. So sometimes we only worship God. Prabhupada says this. He says, nobody will argue that things are God-sent when things are going well, right? Oh, by the grace of God, I passed my exam. By the grace of God, I got a good husband. By the grace of God, my disease is cured. No one says, by the grace of God, my disease is not cured. By the grace of God, I lost all my money. Of course, I have to be very careful about preaching like this, right? Okay. So many years ago, I went to Puerto Rico. It was kind of a funny time in my life, and my godbrother Lakshmi Singha said, why don't you just take a break? So I went to Puerto Rico, and I was living as a brahmacharini, basically, in the ashram. And I went there with no money. Like, I didn't even have $1 when I went there. And my god sister Jai Shri had asked me to help in her business, which one of the many things I discovered is that I should never work in a business. That was not my nature. I mean, I kind of already knew that, but if I didn't absolutely know that, I then absolutely knew that. Anyway, she asked me to help her out of love for her. I was helping her, and I was being paid on commission. We were selling cosmetics. So I worked 1 day a week, and I was making $50 a week. So after 2 weeks of working, I had $100. That was all I had. It was just in my room. And I was giving the Sunday feast class, and I was saying, you know, whether Krishna gives or Krishna takes away, it doesn't matter. You worship him in all circumstances. Right? And you can guess what happened. When I went back to my room, someone had broken into my room and stolen my $100, which left me again without $1 anyway. At that point, I was just laughing, and I was like, Krishna he's saying, are you going to walk your talk? So this is always dangerous for me to preach like this, so I hope I won't go back to my room and find it broken into again. But I want to look a little bit about Draupadi and her response. So she's given as an example in the Nectar Devotion with regard to the anga of being the Lord's friend. Now, this is significant because Draupadi actually has the rasa of friendship with the Lord. In fact, she's the only one mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami who has the rasa of friendship who's female. Now, my reasonable assumption is that in the spiritual world, there are also many those persons who are in friendship with the Lord who are female, that she couldn't possibly be the only one. But Srila Rupa Goswami lists an exemplar for each of the rasas. He lists one, sometimes 2 exemplars. He'll list more than one, sometimes if there's more categories of that rasa, but generally he focuses on one. And for the rasa of friendship, for the city friends, he focuses on the Pandavas, and he mentions also Draupadi, and then he has his primary focus on Arjuna, Krishna's friend Arjuna in the city. But anyway, she has a rasa of friendship, but this is in the part of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu where Srila Rupa Goswami is talking about sadhana bhakti. He's not talking about perfection, he's talking about sadhakas, and he's talking about friendship as a sadhana. Although he does say that this is rare, that sadhakas can engage in this as a practice of bhakti, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that only advanced sadhanas can engage in this as a practice of bhakti. But it is both a practice and a perfection. So although Draupadi, who's a siddha, is being mentioned as an exemplar, this is also a sadhana. Now there's 2 parts of friendship with the Lord. One is to see the Lord is my friend, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, the Lord is my friend, which relates very much to the 2 parts of the 6 items of surrender. that the Lord will always maintain me and the Lord will always protect me, that he is my protector, he is my maintainer. The other part of friendship is thinking, I'm Krishna's friend, which Prabhupada very much relates to preaching. That if we preach, we're taking the role of helping out Krishna in his mission. We're taking the role of being Krishna's friend. So Draupadi is given as an example of the first part of friendship, always seeing that Krishna is my protector and maintainer. So here, Srila Prabhupada writes, on the anga of friendship of having full trust in the Lord, Prabhupada writes, quote, in the Mahabharata, Draupadi says, my dear Govinda, your promise is that your devotee will never be vanquished. I believe in that statement, and therefore in all kinds of tribulations, I simply remember your promise, and thus I live, unquote. The purport is that Draupadi and her 5 husbands, the Pandavas, were put into severe tribulations by their cousin brother Duryodhana as well as by others. The tribulations were so severe that even Bhishma Dev, who was both a lifelong brahmachari and a great warrior, would sometimes shed tears in thinking of them. We don't generally think of some warrior as crying. But Bhishma Dev's crying, thinking about how the Pandavas and Draupadi were suffering. Going on, he was always surprised that although the Pandavas were so righteous and Draupadi was practically the goddess of fortune, and although Krishna was their friend, still they had to undergo such severe tribulations. Though their tribulations was not ordinary, Draupadi was not discouraged. She knew that because Krishna was their friend, ultimately they would be saved. So I really like that point that Gauranga Darshan Prabhu made, right? That when we go through tribulations, the tendency is to lose faith. To think, well, if there's really a God, why isn't he taking care of me? He was referring to Yogakshema Vahamyaham, right? You all remember that? He was saying, Krishna says, I will take care of you. But it sometimes seems that he doesn't. It seems that he lets the thief steal my money. He lets the person insult me. He lets whatever, my spouse betray me. He lets me become unemployed. He lets my house burn down. He lets me get cancer, or, you know. And we think, where is he? There's no God. And I see this even among our devotees. You know, I have a very dear friend of mine who, like, you know, well, my whole life I never broke the regulative principles, and I always followed my initiation vows, and I did all the right things, and still my wife had affairs and betrayed me, so there's no God. It's very common. Prabhupada talked about this in the women in Germany when their husbands, brothers, fathers, sons didn't return after all their prayers and they became atheists. But Draupadi's not saying this. She's not saying, well, when I'm taking the Avarita bath with my husband, with Vyasadeva himself as my priest, and I'm honored as the empress of the world, Jai Shri Krishna. And a few days later, when I'm pulled by my hair in the arena and Dushashan is trying to take my clothes off, oh, forget about Krishna. No, again, she says Jai Shri Krishna. And it's explained also in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu how Krishna feels towards his devotees. Prabhupada explains this in chapter 21 in regard to Krishna's quality of gratitude, that a person who's conscious of his friend's beneficent activities and never forgets his service is called grateful. In the Mahabharata, Krishna says, when I was away from Draupadi, she cried with the words, "Hey, Govinda, this call for me has put me in her debt, and that indebtedness is gradually increasing in my heart." This statement by Krishna gives evidence of how one can please the Supreme Lord simply by addressing him, "Hey, Krishna, hey, Govinda." Of course, we might not see that immediately. I also was appreciating how Gauranga Darshan Prabhu was saying that when Lord Brahma was saying his prayers to Krishna, Krishna didn't respond. Right? Our acharyas even comment how little Krishna was thinking, why is he bothering me with these prayers? But later in Mahaprabhu's pastimes, when Lord Brahma appears as Haridas Thakur, then he's the Namacharya, and Mahaprabhu is there at his passing and carrying him. Right? So we have Draupadi went through her attempted disrobing in a public arena in front of all the elders, none of whom would protect her. I can't imagine this. Right? Leela Shakti, someone pulls you here, tries to take your clothes off, and we're all sitting here just, We don't do anything. That's what it was like. They're not doing anything. A few people objected, but they just verbally objected. They didn't do anything. She didn't have just one husband. She had 5 husbands. And what husbands should she have? Amazing. And they didn't do anything. Jayadratha kidnapped her. Right? Kichak tried to rape her. She didn't have like an easy life. Asvatthama murdered all of her children after the war was, so many things. She had this magic pot, but Duryodhana, by his intrigue, arranged for Durvasa to come after she'd eaten. And then, of course, she's just crying Krishna, and he shows that maybe there's a little bit left. But still she's devoted. We think also of her co-wife with Arjuna, Subhadra, and Arjuna says to Krishna, even after Abhimanyu was killed practically in your presence, Subhadra's love for you has not changed in its color. So from one perspective, we should do our best to engage everybody in service, everybody in the Sankirtan movement, everybody in service. Not just people born in Brahmana families, not just Indians, not just men, not just scholars, everybody. And this is a little plug for artists. Please engage artists in Krishna's service too. Please don't let technology mean we don't engage the artists anymore. Varnashram means all 4 varnas. Engage everybody in yajna. And don't exploit anyone. We also had a nice meditation these last 3 days about not being envious. Don't exploit anyone, ever. We may be in a superior position one day and dishonored the next. If that can happen to Draupadi, it can happen to us, yes? And does that happen? One day we're honored, another day we're dishonored. One day we have power, another day we have nothing. Don't exploit anyone. And when others engage us in service, to be grateful. Never to have an entitlement mentality. To always think, I'm not qualified for anything. What am I qualified for? Srila Rupa Goswami says, I've never done any sadhana. Oh, I do such nice sadhana. Or do we really do sadhana with love and devotion? I once asked one leader in ISKCON, so what's the highest form of japa? He said, to have all your rounds done by 7 in the morning. I'm like, I said, no, to chant Prem Nam, to chant the name with love. That is so how many of us can say we are really chanting? What are we proud of? You understand? Yes? At least I have nothing to, maybe all of you have something to be proud of. But when others engage us in service, we should just be grateful. Actually, it says in the Shastra, the only unforgivable sin is ingratitude. And when people try to harm us and exploit us, we should remember Krishna's there. Krishna's protecting me. Krishna's maintaining me. Krishna's protecting me. And Mare Krishna Rake Ke, Rake Krishna Mare Ke. If someone is harming me, Krishna must be allowing this for some reason. So we do our best to live the ideal. And when we're surrounded by less than ideal, at least remain ideal in our consciousness. We should act properly. We should engage everyone. We should never exploit anyone. And if we're in a situation where others are exploiting and other peoples are acting improperly, at least we keep our trust in Krishna. So I have 2 minutes left on my watch. Any questions, comments, additions, subtractions, chastisements? Yes, Maharaj.
There is some statement that Draupadi said to Krishna later on after the disrobing she never wrote, how Krishna would write to be sorry or whatever. He says, where were you? And so there was some question there.
That Draupadi was with, Mara is saying that there's some statement that Draupadi asked Krishna later, where were you when I was being disrobed? But she's Krishna's friend.
Krishna said I was taking care of
Krishna said I was somewhere else. I had other. I was with Shova. I had other things to do. Yeah, I've also heard that. But Draupadi, you have to remember that Draupadi's in friendship with Krishna, which means she sees him as an equal. So she's just like you would say to your friend, hey, where were you anyway? Like that. Anything good in this class is from Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas and the Shastra. Any mistakes here are mine. Please take the good and leave aside the mistakes. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Enam Kanvandam Aravindanalayatapsam Varhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundaranam Kandar Agom Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobha Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakalem Priya Priti Manti Vasyanti Panti Kayanti Chiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Yaputale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Naraniti Navane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurani Prajanege Nivaseshashana Mare Ashacha Desatarane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaurabhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaurabhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaurabhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jayad, Hagorokenan, Rana, Gorokenan, Radhe. Jayad, Hagorokenan, Rana, Gorokenan, Radhe. Jayad, Radhe. Radhe, Radhe, Radhe. Radhe, 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 Radhe. Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Om Vishnupad. Paramahamsa Parvatakacharya. Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace. Abhaya Chananam Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
ISKCON founder Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
Koki Vaishnava
Jai.
Srila Haridas Thakur.
Jai.
Friends, say Goloka Krishna Chaitanya. Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha. Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrindiki Jai. Shri Radha Gaurana. Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Gaurana
Jai.
Vrindavan Jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan
Jai.
Swami
Jai. 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 Hari Bol.
All glory is to thee, Son of God.
Hare
All glory is to thee, Son of God.
Hare Krishna.
All glory is to thee, Son of God.
Hare Krishna.
All glory is to Shri Guru and Goloka. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Chaitodarpanamarjanam Bhava Mahadavani Nirvapanam Shreya Kairavya Chandrika Vitaranam Vijavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipanam Pranamrita Swadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahudan Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrapita Niyamita Smarane Nakala Etadrishita Vakripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaiva Midrishami Hajjani Nanuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Charorapi Suhishuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagadisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Ishvare Bhavatad Bhakti Hoitaki Twai Nanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripayata Vapada Pankaja Stita Duli Sajashim Vachintaya Nayanam Garaju Daraya Varadam Gad Garudaya Gira Pulakarnishitam Vapukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavishyati Yugayatam Nimishena Chakshusha Bhavishayatam Shunayatam Jagat Sarvam Govindam Virahename Ashlishyava Padamritam Adarshanam Marmahata Karotuva Yatatava Vidadatu Lampato Mat Prananatastusa Eva Napara. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. Oh, my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you've invested all the transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh, my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One can